In this video, we're going to have a look at two components of the IELTS listening and IELTS speaking test and give you some tips on how to get your best score possible. Let's look at the listening test first. The listening test lasts for 30 minutes, but there's a further 10 minutes at the end to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. So the total length is 40 minutes. The test is divided into 4 sections, each containing 10 questions. These sections gradually become more difficult. Section 1 is a simple conversation between two speakers trying to make an arrangement such as a holiday or conference booking. Section 2 is a single speaker giving information about an event or a particular place of general interest. Section 3 is a discussion between 2 to 4 people, such as a seminar or radio interview. And Section 4 is a single speaker giving an academic-style lecture or presentation. It's important to remember that IELTS is a global test, so all the recordings will feature people speaking natural English in a variety of accents from around the world. Great care is taken to make sure that every person in the recordings speaks clearly so that the test takers can understand every accent. Perhaps the main problem encountered by test takers is knowing what to listen for. Here's a secret. It's not necessary to focus hard on everything you hear. If a test taker tries to do this, it's easy to get lost, so it's better to concentrate only on the parts of the recording containing the information needed to answer a question successfully. One of the most important skills to help in this is called listening for a particular reason. To make sure we understand a question, we underline its key words and then predict what we need to listen for. This gives us a reason to listen by prompting us to focus only on what we need to listen for, rather than paying equal attention to every word. Let's take a look at this example question, where two mountaineers, John Graham and Mike Davis, are being questioned by a radio interviewer about their recent successful climb of Mount Annapurna in the Philippines. The example question is, complete the summary below. Write no more than 2 words and/or a number for each answer. John and Mike reached the summit of Annapurna at 3:45 in the afternoon in bright sunshine and sub-zero temperatures, but they were too blank following their success to pay much attention to the weather conditions. Let's listen to the interview.
So, John, can you remember how you felt the moment you reached the summit?
Well, just before we got there, Mike had been complaining that we'd never make it before dark and we should turn back to camp. But we carried on and, sure enough, about 30 minutes later, we found ourselves standing at the summit in full sun and icy air. But all we felt was overjoyed that we'd made it to the top.
So, in this example, you only need to find information about how the climbers felt after reaching the summit. Everything else can be ignored. So, using prediction, we can be reasonably sure we are looking for words which describe extreme happiness. And this gives us the word we're looking for, overjoyed. So you see, with this one simple tip, you're prepping your brain and ears to latch onto the most important words for the question and improving your score. If you're looking for more listening practice, try listening to English language radio or podcasts so you can get used to hearing different kinds of speech. The IELTS speaking interview is a face-to-face conversation between a test taker and an examiner which lasts from 11 to 14 minutes. This means that you're using English with a real person, not a computer, so it's much more natural. The interview has 3 parts. In part 1, lasting 4 to 5 minutes, the examiner first checks name and ID before moving on to ask questions about everyday topics such as education, accommodation, food, travel, etc. This part of the interview is designed to put test takers at ease by asking questions they'll already be used to answering. Part 2, lasting 3 to 4 minutes, the candidate is given a card containing a topic and a number of prompts, usually in the form of what, where, or why type questions. They are also given a pencil and paper to make notes from the prompts during 1 minute's preparation time. The test taker then has to talk for 2 minutes without interruption. And part 3, lasting 4 to 5 minutes, has a connection to the topic of part 2, but this is extended in the form of a natural, two-way conversation between the examiner and the test taker. Each of the 3 parts pose their own problems for test takers. In part 1, for example, feeling initially nervous can prevent fluent speech. In part 2, the ability to keep going could be a problem. And in part 3, not understanding the examiner's question might cause confusion. Of all the problems in the IELTS speaking interview, fear of freezing or not knowing what to say next is common to all parts of the test. With that in mind, let's have a look at some useful tips to overcome this difficulty. Let's suppose that in part 2 of the speaking test, you are giving the following topic. Describe a work of art you like. A test taker could talk about where it is, when they first saw it, what they understand about it, why they like it. 3 main problems could occur with a topic like this. The test taker might only have a general or very little interest in works of art. They might assume that work of art refers only to paintings, a subject they don't know much about, or they might simply not be able to remember a work of art they admire. Freezing can occur in all these cases. One way of dealing with not having much to say about a topic like this is to speak about it from another person's point of view, perhaps a friend or a family member who likes a particular work of art. When doing this, first, be honest with the examiner by saying something like, "Actually, I don't have much interest in works of art, but I know my sister loves Michelangelo," and then go on to describe something that she admires. A second way of dealing with this problem is to talk about it from a negative point of view by explaining why you don't have much interest in works of art. The examiner is not interested in your personal opinion, only how well ideas are expressed. Finally, talking about something related to the topic, such as a film or a book about an artist, actor, or musician will help, as these are all connected in some way to works of art. The speaking test is your chance to show off your English skills, and armed with these tips, you'll do brilliantly. So there you have it, tips that'll help you improve your IELTS speaking and listening score.
In this video, I'm going to give you some tips on how to improve your IELTS writing performance. We're going to look at how to approach Task 1 of both the IELTS General Training and Academic Writing tests, and even have a model answer for you to learn from. Let's start with General Training. Task 1 of the IELTS General Training Writing Test involves writing either a formal or informal letter according to the instructions given in the task question. Let's take a look at the informal letter, which is generally written for a close friend or family member. This question is typical of the informal letter task in the first part of the IELTS General Training Test. You should spend about 20 minutes on this task. You should write at least 150 words. So, you have just been offered a place on a short training course in a small seaside town where a friend of yours is living. Write a letter to your friend. In your letter, number 1, greet your friend and tell him or her the good news about the course. Number 2, ask your friend about life in a seaside town. Number 3, arrange a time to visit your friend before you start the course. So, let's see what a model answer that would achieve a band score of 8 to 9 would look like. Dear Henry, how are you? I hope you're doing well. I have some exciting news. I've just been accepted on the Hotel Management Training course run by your local college. It's a 3-month course which involves visiting the tourist sites in your area. That's great, of course, but what I'm most excited about is being able to spend some time with you exploring your town. I've never lived in a seaside town before, so I'm keen to find out what life is like there. I imagine the people are really friendly. But what about entertainment? What kind of things do you most like to do around town? And are there any interesting places to visit nearby? One thing's for sure, I love seafood, so I'll be spending a lot of time in the local restaurants. The only problem is, I'm so excited I can't wait to come visit you before the course starts in September. I know you usually take your holidays in July, but you might be planning to go away then. If that's the case, could you let me know of another time we can get together? Really looking forward to hearing from you. It's very important to recognize that points 1, 2, and 3 define the structure of your letter. In other words, you should write one paragraph for the subject mentioned in each bullet point and try not to mix the subjects up. Keep them separate. The paragraphs should also be roughly the same length as one another. Number 1. Greet your friend and tell him or her the good news about the course. Number 2. Ask your friend about life in a seaside town. Number 3. Arrange a time to visit your friend before you start the course. So, in paragraph 1, you need to do 3 things. Say hello to your friend. Give him or her the good news. And say a little bit about your course. It's important not to make your greeting too short, but to extend it a little by asking how your friend is doing, or saying you hope that all is going well. Try and be creative. There are many things you can say to make your introduction sound interesting. Similarly, when giving your good news, it's important not only to say how you feel about it, but also to show how excited you are that you'll be living in the same town as your friend for a while. It's a good idea to mention this in the last sentence of your first paragraph, because mentioning the town will introduce the place your questions will focus on in paragraph 2. You could begin paragraph 2 with a question or statement which shows you would like to know what life is like in the town. You can ask about food, the people, the things to do and see, but try not to make the paragraph too long. The model answer uses a mix of questions and statements to show your interest. In the final paragraph, your task is to try and arrange a time to visit your friend. Although you can do this by suggesting a time which is likely to be convenient, it is important to ask your friend to suggest a time that would suit him or her best. Again, the model answer gives a good example of how to do this. Now, let's take a look at the academic writing task. To achieve a good band score in Task 1 of the IELTS academic writing task, you'll need to give a good introduction and overview of a graph, map, chart, process, or diagram. Giving an overview is particularly important. If you don't provide an overview, your score will not rise above a band 5 under the criteria of task achievement. It's very important to understand this point because failing to provide an overview is by far the most common mistake test takers make in academic writing task 1. Many test takers confuse an overview with an introduction, so let's start by clearing up this misunderstanding by defining these terms in the context of this part of the IELTS test by looking at one of the most common types of diagrams used in the IELTS academic writing task 1, the line graph. An introduction in academic writing task 1 is an opening sentence which acts as a summary of what any given diagram represents. It's important to remember that in your introduction, you can't use more than 2 consecutive words, apart from prepositions, articles, numbers, and conjunctions, from the question without being penalized. This means that the same information must be expressed mainly in your own words. In other words, you need to paraphrase the first sentence of the question. Let's look at the task description of a line graph to see how this works in practice. This line graph shows the number of international students attending 2 higher education institutions in Ontario between 2000 and 2015. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. The opening sentence states, "The graph shows the number of international students attending 2 higher education institutions in Ontario between 2000 and 2015. To paraphrase the sentence successfully, knowledge of synonyms is very important, so it's a good idea to lay out 2 columns with words you need to paraphrase. This will give you the model introduction. Note that you do not have to paraphrase every word. You only have to make sure you do not repeat more than 2 main words, i.e., nouns, adjectives, or verbs in the same sequence as the question. So here, it is perfectly okay to write international students, just as it appears in the question. It should now be clear that the job of the introduction is to show what any diagram, in our case, a line graph, represents. The purpose of the overview is quite different. The job of the overview is to describe in 1, occasionally 2 sentences, the main trends or features of our graph. It should not go into any great detail, but you should emphasize the overall message the graph is telling us. So, how do you do this? You do this by looking at the beginning point of the graph on the left and the end point on the right and asking yourself, what is the difference between the information at the beginning point and the information at the end point? In our example graph, the main difference is that overall, the numbers of students attending the 2 higher education institutions in Ontario between 2000 and 2015 went up, with the biggest increase occurring among those international students attending college, shown by the blue line on the graph. This can be described as a dramatic increase, from around 300 students to 4,500. While the red line, despite a slight decrease in student numbers between 2010 and 2015, still went up considerably, from around 1,700 to 3,200. It is clear from the graph that overall the number of students attending both institutions went up during this period, with the college showing the biggest increase in student numbers. Of course, other graphs may well be giving us a different message. For example, another graph may show very little difference between its beginning and end points, or its end points may show a decrease overall rather than an increase. However, the principle is the same and the overall message of your overview will be defined by looking at the beginning and end points of any particular line graph to see what changes, if any, have taken place overall. The next question to consider is, where do I put the overview? An overview can go in one of 2 places, either in the first paragraph following the introductory sentence as shown, or in the conclusion as a final summary. The choice is yours. The only thing you have to remember is to include it in at least one of these 2 places. So, there you have it, tips that will help improve your IELTS writing score. In this video, we're going to look at the IELTS writing test, and in particular, how to approach writing task 2 to get your best score. In task 2 of both the IELTS academic and general training tests, test takers write an essay of at least 250 words in response to a point of view, an argument, discussion, or problem. However, the style of the 2 essays is different. In the academic test, you're asked to write a university-style essay. Your language should be fairly formal in terms of grammar, style, and vocabulary. The general training test essay is written with a more public audience in mind, so you can write in a more informal style. Questions on the academic writing paper deal with university-level material and deal with subjects like general science and technology. General training test questions focus more on popular topics you might see in newspapers or magazines. But there are many examples of essay questions which could appear in both academic writing tests and general training tests. The difference is more in the required response. Formal for the academic test essay, informal for the general training test essay. One common problem is timing. Task 2 is worth 66% of your overall score, so is more important than Task 1. So make sure you leave yourself the full 40 minutes on Task 2 by not spending too much time on Task 1. 2 of the most common problems you might have are: number 1, not understanding what the question is asking you to do, and number 2, not understanding which style, grammar, and vocabulary to use. To do well in writing Task 2, The first and most important thing you need to do is understand what type of question is being asked. Unless you can do this, your response will be poor. So let's look at some tips for understanding the main essay question types. There are 5. Problem solution, agree, disagree, advantages, disadvantages, discuss both points of view, giving an opinion. Here's a typical problem solution type question from a general training writing test.
A recent study shows that an increasing number of boys are dropping out of high school early to study online. What are the reasons for this? What solutions can you suggest to reverse this trend?
The opening statement presents a social problem, and there are 2 questions. First, what is the reason for the problem? And second, what solutions can you think of to solve the problem? As a general rule, you should begin all Task 2 essays by re-expressing the opening statement in your own words. For example, the reason that an increasing number of boys are dropping out of high school early to study online is... So this would be your introduction. You should then divide the main body of your essay into 2 paragraphs. The first would deal with the reasons for the problem, and the second would be a description of possible solutions. Agree, disagree questions generally begin with a controversial statement followed by a question asking you how much you agree or disagree with it, like this one.
One of the best ways to fight climate change is to introduce a carbon tax on gasoline. To what extent do you agree or disagree with this statement?
In this case, the important word is extent. You're being asked to show how much you agree or disagree with an argument, so the language you use needs to reflect this. This advantage-disadvantage question presents a 2-sided factual statement.
Nowadays, many people looking for a dog as a pet prefer to get their animals from a rescue shelter rather than a dog breeder. What are the advantages and disadvantages of doing this?
You'll need to give reasons for your answer and include any relevant examples from your own knowledge or experience. Usually there are a balanced number of pros and cons to the action being described, and this balance should be shown in your response. The first paragraph dealing with the advantages of the action and the other with the disadvantages. The discuss both points of view essay question comes in 2 forms. The first is shown in this academic test question.
Some people believe that university tuition is an investment in a country's future and should be free for all. Others believe that tax money could be better spent in other ways. Discuss both of these views.
This type of essay question always presents 2 options. The most important thing to remember is that it's asking for a balanced response. This means spending equal time on the 2 sides of the argument. So, in this case, the first paragraph would deal with the argument for free university tuition being an investment in a country's future, and the second paragraph would spend an equal amount of time on possible better ways to spend tax money. Please note that this question does not ask for your own views, so do not give your own opinion. However, the second form of the discuss both points of view essay question often contains the sentence, discuss both points of view and give your own opinion. In that case, you would need to write 3 paragraphs, with the 3rd paragraph explaining your own preference, together with the reasons for it. Finally, the giving an opinion essay is similar to the agree-disagree type of question. These usually open with some kind of controversial statement on which you're asked to give your opinion. This academic writing test question is a good example.
Certain endangered animals are being put in zoos as a way of protecting, studying, and displaying them to the general public, and to raise awareness of their unfortunate situation. In your opinion, is this a positive or negative trend? Give reasons for your answer and include any relevant examples from your own knowledge or experience.
Here you don't need to present a balanced argument. Instead, you can express your opinion freely. However, you must justify your opinion by giving a reason for every point in your argument. When writing your conclusion for Task 2, there are 2 important things to remember. Number 1, never add new information or material. And number 2, just give a short, simple, 1-sentence summary of the main points of your essay. If you follow these 2 pieces of advice, your conclusion will be fine. So, there you have it. Tips that will help improve your IELTS Writing Task 2 score.
In this video, we're going to look at how to approach the IELTS reading test and give you some tips to get your best score. There are a number of question types found in the IELTS reading test. These include gap filling, multiple choice, true, false, not given, matching headings, identifying a writer's opinion, classifying and labeling. Whatever type of question test takers face, there is one skill you can apply to all of them. This is the skill of surveying. Before describing the methods involved in surveying successfully, it is important to understand what test takers should not do. That is, never read a whole passage of text. There are two reasons for this. First, there isn't time. Second, it should never be necessary to read more than 2 or 3 sentences to answer a question successfully. Developing the skill of surveying helps test takers locate sentences and information they need to find quickly. How do we apply the skill of surveying to the reading test? Test takers need to be aware of the reason for doing an activity. In this case, reading. The reason is contained in the question itself. So, rather than immediately turning the page and engaging in close reading or detailed understanding, test takers need to spend time looking closely at the question themselves in order to understand exactly what is required. Then, as in other components of the IELTS test, a good start is to underline the key words in a question. Let's look at this question from a text about a famous invention.
In which city did Al-Fazari invent his astrolabe?
What are the key words in this question? The key words are city, Al-Fazari, and astrolabe. After underlining these key words, test takers should read the question again to understand what information they need to find. In other words, identify their reason for reading. In this example, test takers should look in the passage for the name of the city where Al-Fazari invented the astrolabe. Only after this is it time to turn the page in the question booklets and begin the process of surveying the text. Test takers should skim and scan the text to find the name of the city which could represent the correct answer. There is sure to be more than one in a text like this. Identifying the names of cities in this way helps test takers locate the information they are looking for. With each city found, test takers then need to consider the other key words. In this case, Al-Fazari, invent, and astrolabe to see if these occur close to the name of the particular country they have identified. If they do, this will make it likely that the activity was carried out in that location. If not, they will need to keep looking. Test takers should ask themselves, which of these words is least likely to change in the text? In this question, good choices would be Al-Fazari and astrolabe, because proper nouns cannot be represented by synonyms and must remain unchanged. However, you need to make sure that the passage you are looking at is not just about Al-Fazari's life, rather than the city where he worked. If it is just about the inventor, his name will occur many times and test takers may need to look elsewhere to find the correct name of the city where the invention took place. Academic words are also good choices because they are not commonly used in everyday speech and will not usually be changed to a synonymous form in IELTS. So, a word like invented or invention would be a good choice. After finding the key words, underline the sentence and read it carefully to make sure you have now found the correct answer. So, in summary, read the question, underline the key words. Read the key words again to understand your reason for reading. After finding the reason, select key words to skim and scan for. Try and choose academic words or proper nouns as these are generally unchanged. Underline the sentence where the key words occur and check your answer. Surveying in true, false, yes, no, or not given questions can be quite difficult. This is mainly because it is often hard to understand the difference between false and not given. So it's important to clarify the difference between the two. Consider the information given in this extract from a reading text.
If your child is not going to school today, you have to call the office.
The question accompanying this extract reads, is the following sentence true, false, or not given? If your child is absent, the office will call you. In this example, the answer is not given because the text says you have to call the office and the question says the office will call you. However, you do not know whether the office will call you or not because this information is not contained in the text. Therefore, it is not given and this is the correct answer. Remember that for an answer to be false, there must be a direct contradiction between what the text states and what the question says. It is important that test takers understand the contradictions are mainly expressed in two ways, either by using negative words such as might occur, with the text stating the office will call you, and the question saying the office will not call you, or by using an antonym. An example of this would be seeing Kingston is a large city in a text, and Kingston is a small city in the question. Large and small are antonyms, i.e., they have opposite meanings. So we have a contradiction between the text and the question, which means that false is the correct answer. Now that we have clarified the difference between false and not given, let's look at another example taken from a passage on famous astronomers. This example reads,
Edmund Halley observed one transit of the planet Venus.
as before, the first thing to do here is to underline the key words. The key words are Halley observed one transit Venus. After underlining the key words, turn the statement into a direct question. This will produce the question, did Edmund Halley observe one transit of the planet Venus? Turning the statement into a question like this helps test takers clearly understand the reason why they are completing this exercise. In this case, they are looking for a yes or no answer to the question. Did Halley observe one transit of the planet Venus? After turning the statement into a question, test takers should look at the keywords again and, as before, select ones to skim and scan for. Again, the same rule applies, i.e., when skimming and scanning for a word, choose academic words if possible. Here, the most likely words would be observed, transit, and planet Venus. So, as before, skim and scan very quickly. Don't read the text for understanding. Find the word observe, underline the sentence, and then read the sentence carefully to understand what the sentence is saying. Once you have read the sentence, go back to the question and ask yourself, do I have the information I need? Is the sentence telling me that Halley observed one transit of the planet Venus or not? If you cannot find this information, you should read the next sentence. Most likely, the information will be there. If not, skim and scan again, and the chosen word and the information needed will be further down in the text. In the text, the key words from the question all occur close together in the third sentence of the paragraph. They are preceded by a negative outcome, signaled by the phrase, Halley was not able to. By skimming and scanning for the key words and close reading of the entire sentence, it is clear that the answer to the question, did Halley observe one transit of the planet Venus, is no, and any statement to the contrary would be false. So, in summary, contradictions in true, false, or yes-no questions are expressed by using negative words or antonyms. If there is no contradiction and the information is missing, not given is the correct answer. In true, false, or yes-no questions, turn the question statement into a direct question. This will help you understand what you are looking for, so you need to practice reading no more than 2 or 3 sentences per question. Otherwise, use the same surveying skills as before. Very often, test takers complain that they do not have enough time, but this happens when they read more than is necessary to successfully answer a question. So, you need to establish the idea of reading no more than 2, maximum 3 sentences per question and using the skill of surveying to find the information you need. This will help enormously in ensuring that you become accustomed to using time more effectively, one of the most important considerations for any test takers to bear in mind when taking the IELTS test. So there you have it, tips that'll help you improve your IELTS reading score.